I have a good friend. His name is Toñejo Rodriguez, and he used to be a motorcycle and quad champion. And then about 30 years ago, he had an accident and he broke his back. So he's in a wheelchair. And he is the most positive, incredible human being I've ever met. And he says, I'm a really lucky guy. And, most people say, what? And he said, oh, yeah, I've gotten to do everything I've ever wanted. I have a wonderful family. After my accident, I've continued. He did the Dakar in an adapted truck after he had the accident. He started racing jet skis, and he became European champion. And he did the pole position at the World Championships. And he says, everything I've ever wanted to do, I've done. And, and he's a fun guy. He says, if God came down and gave me my legs back, I'd probably be stupid enough to do something dangerous and, end up in a wheelchair.
Happy Friday, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Weekly Bustle. Today, I am in the Mediterranean. I am with Mr. Adolfo, calling it out of Spain. Mr. Adolfo, how are you doing?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, actually, for showing up, because I do see your topics. I do see the stuff you do, and I am pretty excited to give my listeners a chance to actually listen to someone who is an expert in this field and someone who is in Spain, because I'm jealous. Adolfo, I am. Right now in the Netherlands, it's been raining for the past few days. Finally, I see a little brink of sun coming out today, so I'm a bit happy. But how is the weather down south?
Well, it's funny because I've lived in a lot of places, and my wife and I, one thing we always mention is how used we are to having sunshine, right? So I live on the coast in a place called Alicante, very popular with tourists. And we must have 340, 50 days of sun a year. When it's cloudy for 2 or 3 days, we're actually, we feel depressed, we're losing energy. And when I lived in places like Canada, or I've worked a lot in the UK, I remember thinking that, right? How can people live without the sunshine? It's so essential.
Yeah, indeed. Mm-hmm. Indeed. It's actually quite funny. In the Mediterranean or the Spanish coastline, it is still, well, not these days because of climate change, but it is still quite a reasonable heat. Right now, I think it's getting really bad. But in Pakistan, where I'm from, we did not like the heat, right? So I'm having this debate with my friends about how people in the colder climate are more, like on time, things need to be done clearly and everything. And people in the hot climate are more laid back. And I'm like, yeah, we're laid back because we don't have the energy to do anything. It's just so warm. So you just don't want to do anything. But in Pakistan, it's actually even worse because the infrastructure is so bad that you feel like you're on edge because of all the heat. So I'm shocked that I see a very laid back person like that in the heat.
Well, we have a great advantage, which is the sea, right? So I live, just a few meters away from the beach. And that sort of balances out. So in winter, it doesn't get very cold. And in summer, it manages the heat a bit and you get breeze. So it's actually very, very, manageable, and it's nice. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I love Alicante. I want to go there because it's the south of Spain also has a lot of significance for us on the eastern side, because we've heard a lot of histories about it. So we want to really go there and explore it a little bit for ourselves. So I'm looking forward to it. I've only been to Barcelona so far in Spain, so I'm looking forward to it. But to be clear, you've worked and lived in a lot of places. Where are you actually from then?
So my family is Spanish, right? My parents are from Spain, but my father was a translator for the United Nations. He worked for the International Civil Aviation Organization. So I grew up like an army brat, right? I traveled and lived in a lot of places. I lived in Canada, lived in Mexico, in the US, I lived in Asia. And so it's kind of, you're from everywhere and nowhere, I guess. But as a child, I hated that because you would move a lot and you wouldn't make friends. But as an adult, I just found it so, great and enriching, because there's nothing more humbling than seeing other cultures, right? I mean, you're talking about Pakistan. I mean, you go somewhere and you just realize that what you think works or values are, et cetera, are different. And I think everybody should do that, right? I think that's part of basic education. That's probably the best education I got as a child, was being able to travel and see different cultures.
I agree 100%. I actually was also privileged enough. Well, privilege is it's a questionable thing, right? You would say that, yeah, okay, I get to experience a lot of different cultures. A lot of people won't be able to, but you also didn't get any home base, right? You don't have a place which you call home, and that's also privilege in itself. So now I live abroad in the Netherlands for 5 years, and I'm still struggling to call it home, right? My wife
Right.
is here, my child is born here, my wife's family here, lovely people, but my family isn't here, my home base isn't here. So I'm just like, am I still comfortable? And I had the same thing. I was born in in Saudi Arabia, so
Right.
in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I was raised in Pakistan. Then I moved to Turkey for my education, and now I'm here for work. So all over the place during my young life, but in Pakistan it was most of my young life. So I feel a little bit more connection there. But how do you feel about that? How do you feel about moving around so much and not having a home base of sorts?
Well, when I was younger, I really struggled with it. And I used to, I'd come back to Spain, which is, I guess, our origin. And people would
Mm,
always see me as, you've lived abroad, you're different. And I felt I didn't have a home. But one of the things, and this is something that actually I've integrated into my practice, is I think we all have the power to give meaning to things, and we get to choose that meaning, right? So
yeah,
at one point, I just decided, I can see it as a problem or a handicap, or I can just see it as a wonderful, gift. And so
yeah,
I just stopped having to explain it or justify it to people. And then people start saying, "Oh, wow, that is so cool. I wish I could have done that." Right. So for me, it is a gift. But I'm pretty optimistic about almost everything. I think you can find lessons in everything, and I tend to choose. Happiness in a large part is a choice. I mean, there's dramatic
yeah,
things that can happen to you, but generally,
yeah,
what happens, it doesn't mean anything. It's the meaning you give to it that then changes
yeah,
your emotions and your biochemistry, etc. So I'm a big
yeah,
believer that hey, you've gotten things that come your way, you can find a good thing out of that. And like I said, I've seen a lot. It's humbled me, right? It's one of the things that I work with professional athletes, I work with CEOs, and having gone so much to different cultures taught me that you never really know, right? And when you think then there's a whole world of stuff you've never seen. So I'm
yeah,
always I'm a work in progress, and I think we all are, right? And I think that's how we have to
yeah.
see it.
Oh, I love that last line, work in progress. I completely agree with you. I completely resonate with you. Happiness is a choice, and it's very difficult to convince people about it because they always measure and attach happiness to a certain external goal rather than something internal, right? Like if I reach this job position, I'm happy. If I actually hit this amount in savings or retirement, then I'm happy. If I travel the world, then I'm happy, right? I see a lot of people for some reason obsessed about traveling. And I agree, you and I are those kind of people who were privileged enough or lucky enough that we got to explore cultures without having to put in effort because our parents kept moving. And we see the value in it. But for some people, it's literally a goal in itself. They're like, only if I see all the cultures in the world, only then I will become happy. So I don't resonate with that. I feel like it's become too externalized. So how would you internalize that? So you say it's a choice, and it's very easy to say it's a choice,
Yeah.
Adolfo, but it's not. For some people, it's difficult. So
Well,
what are your thoughts?
it's a trap, right? The moment you start putting your happiness contingent upon something that you don't control, then it's a lottery, right? Oh, my
Yeah,
wife has to say this, or I have to get this promotion, or I have to be able to travel. And if those events don't occur, which many can be out of your hands, then
yeah,
your happiness is gone, right? Whereas for me, happiness is a much more around how do I, what's important for me? How do I align with what's important for me? And then how do I take everything that comes and make the best out of it? And that doesn't mean it's all good. I mean, I've had lots of challenges in my life, but I'll be honest with you. I look back on them now, and some of them were really great learnings. And I'm
yeah,
able to work with clients who go through very difficult times because I can say, "Hey, I went through this," and they're like, "Wow!" And you got through that, yeah. And there was times I didn't even know how I was going to make it through. Life sometimes just is really tough, but getting through that is actually a privilege because you can then go and say, "Okay, I've learned," and especially in what I do, right? And what did I learn from this, and how can I model it for other people? And then it gives them hope, right? I've been through that. You can make it through. And I think, like I said, everything is a choice. And there's even I have a good friend. His name is Toñejo Rodriguez, and he used to be a motorcycle and quad champion. And then about 30 years
oh,
ago, he had an accident and he broke his back, so he's in a
mm,
wheelchair. And he is the
yeah,
most positive, incredible human being I've ever met. And he says, I'm a really lucky guy. And most people say, "What?" And he said, oh yeah, I've gotten to do everything I've ever wanted. I have a wonderful family. After my accident, I've continued. He did the Dakar in an adapted truck after he had the accident. He
Wow.
started racing jet skis, and he became European champion. And he did the pole position at the World Championships. He says, everything I've ever wanted to do, I've done. And and he's a fun guy. He says, if God came down and gave me my legs back, I'd probably be stupid enough to do something dangerous and end up in a wheelchair.
Break the
But that's a great example. I mean, few people have his mental fortitude, but that's a great
yeah
example. He chooses to be happy. He finds all these wonderful things in his life, and he just does it. He had a
yeah
funny story with this guy. I know you like stories. He flew into Miami, where he lives now, and a friend was supposed to pick him up. There was a mix-up, so a friend didn't come. So the guy starts wheeling with his wheelchair, starts going from the airport to Bristol, where he lives, at Brickell, and he says halfway through, the guy called me, and I said, "No, I want to see if I can make it now. Don't come pick me up." And he just, and he said it became a challenge for me. So anything can
yeah
be a challenge, and anything can be a great opportunity and a growth opportunity. And I think that's where mindset comes into it so much, right? I mean, Carol Dweck did a fantastic piece of work on growth mindset, and that changes the way you see the world, right? Because if she basically said, just for your listeners who don't know it, there's sort of fixed mindset and growth mindset. And fixed mindset
yeah
basically says that the skills you have is what you were born with, right? It's kind of like your height.
yeah
You can't motivate
yeah
that. You can't motivate. But growth mindset said skills and intelligence you can always develop. And actually, that's true. We know now from
yeah
neuroplasticity, et cetera, you can consistently learn and improve. So the meaning of that is that if you think everything is you have a fixed mindset, everything's a test. You're either good enough or you're not good enough, right?
good enough.
Whereas if you have a growth mindset, struggles are just data. It's okay, I'm not good enough, and I have to learn this, I have to strengthen this, I have to develop this, right? And that's a very, very different. You emotionally feel something completely different, right? It goes back to what we were saying
Yeah.
about you choose what you feel, right? Either I'm a loser, I'm not good enough, or gee, okay, now I have this new area to struggle in. All of this I didn't know I even needed to develop. And I love being a learner. I love being, having a beginner's mind, right? I think it keeps
Yeah.
you humble. I think it keeps you fresh. I think human beings are made to strive for something, right? That's when you were happiest.
I agree 100%. I really, really love that last line. And I also love that story about your friend in a wheelchair. Yeah. When you hear that, you feel sad quite naturally. You go
Right.
like, oh, the person is not being able to live the way I'm supposed to live. I take it for granted. But when you meet that person, you sometimes feel like, how is that possible? But it is quite common for us to take for granted how we live. And this also is a study, I think you would know this as well, that people who go into these accidents where they lose limbs, or people who actually win the lotteries, their happiness levels are way different when it happens, but then it starts normalizing
Right.
after a few months. It just becomes a new normal. And I think, as you said, human beings strive for something because we always return back to the baseline. So we
Yeah.
want to strive for something to again increase our happiness or increase our challenge. And I do appreciate the growth tribe, the growth mindset concept, because I feel quite similar. I actually have a young daughter. She's like 7 months old. And for the past 7 months, it's been a learning experience. It's
Right.
it's learning to understand how things work. It's learning to understand how I can make stuff happen. The biggest learning for me was trying to put her to bed. And it's a struggle, Adolfo. I'm not joking, but finally, after 7 months, I've cracked the code. Okay, there's a way you turn her, there's a way you put her down, and the way you roll her off that she just sleeps. It took me 7 months to figure out, and you have no idea how happy I am now. And I think that's part of the growth mindset. That when you achieve something that seems impossible a few months ago, that okay, she would always cry, she would always be in my hands. I would always have to call the mom in for support. But now I can put her down by myself. I feel independent. I feel fulfilled. I go and tell my wife about it. I tell my mother-in-law about it. I tell everyone who's willing to hear it that I cracked the code. And I feel that that celebration is also a big part of your growth mindset. We like to celebrate the wins. With fixed mindset, it's either pass or fail,
Right.
right? So it's either you're doing it or you're not doing it. If you're doing it, you're supposed to do it. And if you're not doing it, well, you can't do it. So there is no element of celebration. How important do you think celebrations are in trying to build better habits and trying to build success?
So I always say celebration is an interesting question. I always say uh, you should always be really happy but never satisfied. And I don't mean that in a bad sense. I mean you should always be striving for more, but be very happy with what you have, right?
Yeah,
And you need to celebrate the little stops along the way, right? one of the big failures. So in my practice, we work with people who are really ambitious and really want to go on a road to mastery, whether they're professional athletes or corporations. And one of the things I teach them is you need to have a roadmap, right? Because first thing is that doesn't happen overnight, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, nobody starts playing the violin in 2 months is a world class violinist, right?
Yeah.
Nobody picks up a basketball and is Michael Jordan in a month.
Yeah.
And we live in a hack mindset world, right? And it's terrible. So because it's a long journey, you then have to. This is where celebrations come in. You have to celebrate those little steps, right? And the thing is, those little steps won't look like the final output, right? But
Yeah.
but that's why you have to understand the pieces. To get there, I have to do all of this, right? So I got this one. Did I
Yeah.
get that? Great. Let me celebrate it, right? But we're always just looking for, I think there's a great saying, you're comparing your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 20, right? No, I want to be
Yeah.
like that already. It's ridiculous. And
Yeah.
so you can celebrate if you are on track of what you said you're going to do and you're actually making progress. And I think that's what kills so many people, right? So entrepreneurs, they just give up, after 1 or 2 tries. And a lot of times it's just the one who's persistent enough. Athletes, same type of thing. I mean, you could just look at Michael Jordan, right? Got cut from his high school team, could have quit,
Yeah.
right? But he went back and he got
Yeah.
better. And there's a million examples like that. Andre Agassi dropped to outside of the 100, and it was all in his head. And then he just saw that. The story of that is really good. It was in his book Open. He saw the daughter of one of his trainers who had had an accident and was struggling to regain and to start to walk again. And he thought, God, if I applied a half of how much effort she makes to what the talent I have, I should be enjoying what I'm doing, right? And
Yeah.
he realized he should be celebrating, instead of worrying about whether he won or didn't win, just celebrating the fact that he can play professional tennis, that he's good. And then that just changed his mindset. And from there on, he became known as the Zen master of tennis. So
Yeah.
I think celebration again goes back to meaning, right? And
Yeah.
it's important. And it's kind of the triangle of, we were talking about this before, the triangle of performance, right? There's 3 parts to
Yeah.
that. There's work, okay, and so all A-type overachievers get that. But then
Yeah.
there's rest, which people have a lot of trouble with that. They think, it's slack time. Rest is part of your work. It's part of your training. It's
Yeah.
part of your planning. It's
Yeah.
when growth occurs. If you think
Yeah.
of a muscle, right? When you are lifting a weight, that's not when you grow. It's when you're breaking down the muscle. And then when you rest, it's when it builds more muscle, right?
Yes.
You go into
Yeah.
homeostasis, right? Your body says, I need to meet these new demands, and that's where it grows.
Yeah.
And mentally, it's the same thing. When you're going
Yeah.
through a challenge, it's not when you're learning it. It's later when you go through it and you learn, and then you build and you become more resilient. And so
Yeah.
the third leg is nutrition, which for me is environment, right? It's not just physical
Yeah.
nutrition; it's environment, get around positive people, etc. So
Yeah.
that those 3 things are important, and that's where celebration comes in. Is in that rest, you celebrate doesn't mean you become complacent. Now that's the
Yeah.
danger, right? Oh, it's done, right? I said we're always a work in progress, but you say, hey, all this effort has come up to something. Okay, now I get energy to keep doing more, right? Because if you
Yeah.
don't see any progress, it's frustrating. So I think it's that
Yeah.
balance, and like you were saying with your daughter, hey, I celebrate this, and it's the little things that really bring joy in life, right?
Yeah.
I have a small son. I have a 5-year-old son, and he was born in the COVID. So he was just
Oh.
1 year old when COVID lockdown came, and it's just incredible. I've done a lot of research on this, how it affected him, right? Because he didn't go through normal phases when he was 2 or 3, like a normal kid would, which is go out to the park and play with kids, because all the parks were closed, people were locked down, and he started school later, and he started talking much later. So for me, it was all around challenging my paradigms and saying, okay, so how, what's the normal cycle for a child? Okay, so he's not following that. So what does he need? And each time we sort of unlocked how he thinks, it was a celebration, right? And now, like
Mm.
you say, I mean, he's just the happiest kid I've ever met, and that makes me happy that we can, bring him that joy, and that's, celebrate that every day. So everything else then is less important, right? And you still strive for stuff, but if you are just so rich, and I feel so blessed, and so I'm so grateful about all these things I have. Which I don't
Yeah.
care if anybody else thinks this is a lot or a little. I really don't care. I'm so full with it that I just enjoy. And then of course I'm always striving, and I always have ideas, and I love learning, and I read a lot, and,
Yeah.
I have projects. and that's great. That's part of being human. But the energy to
Yeah.
do that comes from what you were saying, celebration, right? I'm
Yeah.
so happy. Hey, I want to feel this more. I want to feel more of this. Let's do more fun stuff, right?
No, it was so many questions I have, right?
That's
Because
right.
there is no, it's all, yeah, like it's so easy and so simple how you make it sound, right? Like it's just you celebrate, you try to make the most of it, you want to be happy but you don't want to be satisfied. And I resonate with most of it. That's how I also try to
Mm,
live my life. But what I'm struggling with these days, Adolfo, is trying to also balance the what do you call it, like I would like to say it in a way that balance the arms that I'm standing on or the legs that I'm standing on. I think that's a better
mhm,
way of saying it, right? So this mindset is great. I consider myself to have a growth mindset. But the struggle with not being satisfied is that sometimes you just don't know where to stop and
mm,
revel in the joy that you are, right? So that those are the kind of questions I want to ask you about. I want your thoughts on that because, for example, right now physical health is very important to me. As you said, like you break down
mm,
the muscle and it's after the rest that you come up with. I want to build muscle. I want to build a business. I want to be a good father. I want to
mm,
be more nutritionist. I want to be more healthy. So all of that stuff at the same time is quite impossible. That's what I personally believe because
right,
you are finite. It is finite, the time that you have, the energy that you have. Right now, I had 2 days of daddy time with my daughter.
mhm,
So my wife was working and she was out with her friends. So I was responsible end to end for my daughter. So I had to make her sleep and everything, and she always sleeps in my arms. So now my arms are hurting really
mm,
badly after 2 days of like holding her and walking around with her for hours. But now today I have a workout that I
mhm,
need to go, which is also very centric on my upper body. And now I'm like, my whole body feels broken, Adolfo.
mhm,
And I want to rest, but I also have a plan to
right.
actually finish my workout. So how do we try to make ourselves understand that okay, there is finite amount of things that we can do, and prioritization is key, but a person like me cannot prioritize. I want to do everything, Adolfo. So how does performance help us
Okay.
there?
Okay, so just a bunch of different things I'd like to say. So
Yeah,
let me start with the end. You were talking about um, something at the end. So your daughter, and you've been with her 2 days. Now you got to work out, right? And basically, what you're saying is life is messy, right? I mean, and it
yeah,
doesn't. We can't program it the way we'd like. And I want to get into
yeah,
shape, but right now, then I've got this. My business takes off, and I've got this
yeah,
issue, and I don't know, whatever. Your brother-in-law dies, and then you got to help your sister.
yeah,
So all you
yeah,
know, excuse the expression, shit happens, right? And we can't
yeah,
program that. And so for me, I have a strong background in sports performance, and I've worked with professional
yeah,
athletes. So for me, this is what I call training mindset versus match play. And this is really important. You can
yeah,
apply this and you don't have to be an athlete to do it. So when
yeah,
you train, your mindset has to be, and it's a trick to what you're saying about balancing the ambition and celebration. So when
yeah,
you train, you need to be a perfectionist, and you need to stop and break things down and redo them, and you want to do it perfect because that's what
yeah,
training is all about. Now, you don't get frustrated with it. You just say, I'm here to make it better, and and I'm just going to be, diligent, and I'm ruthless
mhm,
until I get it right. Now, when you go into match play, that can kill you. Why? Because there's so many things you can't control. So if something
yeah,
doesn't go your way and you get hung up on that and you go, well, no, it's you're rigid. It has to be this way, right? Then you get, screwed, right? So what you need
yeah,
is to be able to, what you were saying about your daughter stuff, life is match play, right? So you need to
yeah,
train, you need to prepare stuff, and then you need to realize that sometimes you're going to have to move things around, right? I have a really strict training regimen. I've been doing this for 30 years, but there's days where I'm like, well, today I can't, right? And I used to get really
yeah,
upset about it, and that's okay because one day or one meal or whatever doesn't matter, really doesn't. And we
yeah,
tend to be obsessive about that and then magnify or one mistake, right? People make
yeah,
mistakes and they go down these deep holes, right? I call
yeah,
it bleeding out. You start hemorrhaging,
yeah,
right? So, oh my God, I did
yeah,
this. Now they're going to think this, and now my boss is going to do whatever. And then, and you go into this negative spiral, and then I'll lose my job, and then I won't find another job, and I'll lose a house. Jesus,
yeah,
wait, relax. You just had one mistake, right? So we tend to amplify it because our brains are
yeah,
wired to look for the negative, right? That's how we
yeah,
survived, right? We give more importance to negative things or
yeah,
dangers, right? Like you're walking through the forest and a tiger eats you, so you give
sure.
more importance to that because that's kept us alive, right? But it's maladapted now, and then we give. If you go through your day, ask anyone, how's your day? And they probably has 50 great things and 2 bad things, and they'll tell you about the bad things. That's the first thing out of their
Yeah,
mouth. right?
Yeah.
Why do we do that? We put, that's just the way we're wired, right? But that's where working your mindset is so important, because it's, okay, well, what is really important? And percentage, then you get on. I tell people to track, right? So I track my workouts. And again, I've been
Yeah.
working out for 30 years, 35 years. Um,
My God.
but I still think that I do more than I do sometimes, right? So I write it down, and then I realize there whether I have or haven't. And sometimes it's, or with my meals, and I'll look and I'll go, well, actually, I haven't missed that much. Okay, so I missed one meal. So what, right? And my wife
Yeah.
starts, we do this together, and then she's like, oh my God, we really overate. And then we look at it and we go, okay, how many calories did we consume in a week? And blah, and it's irrelevant, right? So it's putting things in
Yeah.
context. It's knowing how to flow, right? I think that's really
Yeah.
important. So life is about being, demanding more of yourself, but knowing that when things don't work out, you got to flow around it. And Kobe
Yeah.
Bryant had a really good interview where he basically said, worrying about outcomes is stupid, because it doesn't change anything, right? So you go, you play, you win.
Do your best.
That's
Yeah.
great. Tomorrow you got to get
Yeah.
up and start doing the journey over again. You play, you
Yeah.
lose, sucks. But doesn't matter. Tomorrow you have to get up and do the same journey again, right?
Yeah.
And nothing you can worry about will actually change outcomes. You can act differently. Your actions do. But if you're worrying about something that's out of your control, it doesn't do anything, right? So you need to flow
Yeah.
with it, and sometimes say, hey, I'm in a phase, and that's where I talk a lot about phasing, right? So
Yeah.
you have all these things you were saying, these ambitious projects, and I understand you, because that's me in a nutshell. And what I learned sometimes is, okay, I have this one I'm going to put off for 3 years, right? That sounds like a lot,
Yeah.
but because I need to foundationally, I know, for example, I need to finish. I've been wanting to finish my PhD for a while, right? But I said, okay, now I need to get my business, which has just been growing exponentially. Now I need to
Yeah.
consolidate that. So I pushed it back 5 years and said, next couple of years, I'm going to focus on this, stabilize that, and then we can do something else. And it's
Please do.
learning to
Yeah.
have patience. And I guess as I get older, that's one of the good things about gray hairs, right? You see perspective, and you realize before I needed everything to be done. Even the way I
Yeah.
train and approach stuff, right? It goes back to the beginner mindset. I used to train to get to an objective, right? So I've been doing
Yeah.
martial arts for 35 years. So and now I had an operation, and I'm working with a dance teacher, a ballet teacher from New York. She's
Yeah.
spectacular, and we're working on rebuilding, and it's just every day I learn things, and I just, oh wow, I have this this weakness. I need to strengthen it. And it's not about
Yeah.
when do I have to done by it. It's just I'll do it every day, and
Work in
then
progress. Yeah.
and it's on the road, and I don't have a timeline. It doesn't matter, because I'm just growing every day. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's how you balance that happiness. So you have the ambition to do stuff, but I think what kills the happiness is the expectation, right? I have to have it done by this date, or I have to do
Yeah.
5 workouts this week, right? Well, okay, that's your goal, but you can't be rigid on it, and it can't be an expectation that becomes a life sentence, right? Or
Yeah.
careers don't do this, right? I mean, I had a hunter
Yeah.
explain this to me, 20 years ago. They do this, right?
Yeah.
Any top, they do this. People, mess up. Elon Musk tells a great story about how he sold PayPal, and he made, I think it was 120 million, and then he
Yeah.
invested so heavily in SpaceX and Tesla and whatever, that at one point he was living in a friend's house, or living and asking a friend for rent. I mean, this guy's got 120 million, but he was okay. The thing is, he was never scared to lose it, right? And he knew it was a
Yeah.
phase, and and now, of course, he's obviously one of the richest men in the world. But it's all
Yeah.
around phases, and when you're in those phases, you just say, "What can I learn?" And you just keep, what do I have to? And maybe you go too far, right? It's hard. It's hard to have the whole star diagram of
Yeah.
workout, health, life, family, work. It's hard, and so you need to know that sometimes you're going to give up. The idea is to slowly be pulling them out and stabilizing them, and then choose what's really important to you, right? So this is the other
Yeah.
thing I tell people, because we all have wonderful dreams, right? I'd love to be a professional athlete, and I'd love to be a movie star,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
and that all sounds cool, but the question is, what really is important to you, right? And so you
Yeah.
say, okay, well, a movie star, but probably not that important to me, right? Now, my training is that, my health, yeah, that's really important. So I am willing to give stuff up, because any
Yeah.
ambitious goal, and that can be externally ambitious or internal, right? Whatever your goal is, requires sacrifice, and that's a dirty word now, right? But people don't want to talk about that. But it's true. It's actually healthy, right? A marriage requires sacrifice. You're giving up the
Yeah.
right to go with other people, right? You're choosing
Yeah.
a monogamous relationship. Now, I mean, that's not bad. That's good, right? If that's
Yeah.
what you want, right? Because it allows
Yeah.
you to have the strength to build a family and a stable home, whatever, right? So
Yeah.
any really ambitious thing requires commitment and sacrifice.
Yeah.
Raising a child, I would tell people,
Yeah.
it's one of the hardest things in the world. Now, I love it. I wouldn't
Yeah.
change it for anything. I'm eternally grateful.
Yeah.
But 98% of my priorities rotate around my son. What we
Yeah.
spend, most of my spend is on him. My time and my agenda is all organized around his calendar, and that's okay. I'm really
Yeah.
happy to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't go out. I give up a series of things. I work out either really early or really late at night because so it doesn't
Yeah.
interrupt him. So life is around
Yeah.
sacrifices, and
Yeah.
professional athletes are obsessed and they give up stuff. But that's just
Yeah.
because that's what's important. The key is to say, is this important enough for me? Right. So when you're making those sacrifices, you have a strong why, you have a strong mission, and you say, I'm doing it for this. Otherwise, then you'll sort of say, why am I doing it? And I get burned out.
Yeah.
Right. So that's my
Yeah.
thoughts on that. Yeah.
Oh no, I loved all of those thoughts because I resonate with that so much. It feels like I'm talking to like an older version of myself. So that's what I'm looking at here. I'm really, really happy to hear that someone of your stature and someone of your experience is talking about stuff that I feel like I already know a little bit about. So I'm like, okay, maybe my learnings and my things are also going a bit in the right direction, right? That I am following along quite quickly. What I really, really liked was the training design versus the match play, right? Or in football, I'm a football fan, so we have game states in football, right? Game states are points where a game can change. Either you score a goal or you concede a goal. And it's very interesting when you were explaining that analogy. What came to my mind was this concept about closed games and open games. Like, for example, chess is a closed game,
Mm-hmm.
right? All the possibilities in chess are by design. So an algorithm or practice will always make you better at chess
Mm-hmm.
because it's all about repetition and trying to get the shit together because at the end of the day, it's a closed game. Life is not a closed game. Life is
Mm-hmm.
an open game. It's like
Right.
chess, but some hand comes in and takes away your pieces every now and then. And you're like, shit, I didn't expect that.
Exactly.
And there, practice and repetition and algorithms and computers will never be able to function as good as critical thinking. As I said, it's about being
Exactly.
on your thought, being on your feet. Like it happened, our play didn't run well, and now we're one goal down. We need to think of something right now. That's a skill that I feel like a lot of people lack because they really are focused on the repetition part. And they're like, it's focus on the repetition, focus on the practice, focus on doing that. But yeah, but that there needs to be a goal. As you said, there needs to be a goal of what you do with that. So really, really enjoyed that conversation. I think really, really was there. However, I want to add a little bit more about what you just mentioned about sacrifice. I completely agree with it. Problem is, Adolfo, for people like me, we don't want to sacrifice, but we want everything. Right? That's how it works. That's just the golden egg that you want, right? And I want you to tell me a little bit more about how people like me would be able to learn better in prioritizing and sacrifice. I agree with you. Life is a trade-off, and if I want to become financially, mentally, spiritually, and physically healthy in 1 year, that would be unreasonable because to be financially healthy, I need to spend less money. But to be physically healthy, I need to spend more money. So that kind of contradicts each other. And for spiritually healthy, I need more time, which both of these things will take away, etc., etc. So, what are your thoughts on that? And before we go into that, I really want to actually talk. And this is what I love about my podcast. 30 minutes have gone by. We're talking to each other like we're lifelong friends. But I never got an official introduction from Adolfo. I never got an official calling of the practice that he's been talking about so long. So, Adolfo, I want you to first mention everything about that and mention a little bit about what you do, what your practice is. I do hear that your background is in sports. And then you can answer my questions about prioritization and how do we try to make ourselves understand that we can't really have it all.
Okay, well, I'll try and make the introduction brief because I always think I'm the least interesting thing we can talk about. So just real quick, so my life has always been around, and it comes, who I am is part of that, around being the best at something. If I found something, and my wife always says, she says, I think you have Asperger, right? Because you're obsessive. You care a lot about what you care, and then you don't care about anything else. And so I don't know what it is, but I am, when I find something, I get passionate about it, and then I just want to learn. But this is since I was a kid. This has been like that. And I started training martial arts as a kid, and I just loved it. I remember I walked in, and I thought I was meant to do this, and then I would train 7 days a week, and I trained on my own. And that just so I like the process, which I think is key, right? I really enjoy the process, and I enjoy what I discovered during the process. And so then I went to live in Japan, and I trained in Japan. And then and I was competitive. I used to play tennis, at a pretty competitive level, and American football. And then my studies sort of complemented that. So I went off and I did my graduate degree at Yale, and that's where I discovered there's the science around performance, right? So there's a lot of science. I've studied what works and what doesn't, and how the brain works and how we sabotage ourselves. And so I just went down that rabbit hole, and I think I'm still learning on that. So, but for 30 years I've been doing that since I did my graduate degree at Yale. And then I married the two, right? And I was like, so what I do is actually part of it is break down that science in a way that's really understandable and easy, right? Because the problem with science is it's all theoretical, and then people are like, that's great. So what do I do with it? So I break it down, and then I've worked with professional athletes. So I've worked mostly with ATP tennis players, guys like Guillermo Garcia Sanchez, Juan Monaco, Santi Giraldo, right? So people who were in the top, well, eventually got up to the top 10. It's how do I help them? So these are successful people. How do you help them to be better, right? And I learned that there's a series of rules, and they work, right? There's a series of techniques, and it just works, which is what I call the performance formula. That's what I've modeled. And then I said, hey, if I went to companies, we could really make that better, because the way companies work nowadays is archaic, right? It's industrial model. I'll even say to people when I'm meeting them, say, if your favorite sports team was run the way you run your company, you would be absolutely aghast, right? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Oh, it's true. I mean, look, imagine, the Mister coming in. You like football, right? So imagine Mister coming in after a game and saying, oh, you were all rubbish. You better smarten up or you get fired. I'll be back next Sunday, right? Wait a minute. No, right? He doesn't do that, right? Which is what a manager does, right? You're not hitting your targets. You better sell more or you're fired. I'll be back in 3 months, right? That's pretty insane. What does a Mister do? He takes it and he says, okay, guys, what didn't work? Where are our strategies wrong? What skills are we missing? Where's our tactics? Monday, we all start working on it together, right? That's a mindset. Imagine if a business did that. Hey, guys, you're not hitting your targets, right? So first of all, nobody doesn't perform because they want to, generally speaking. Right? People don't want to, oh, yeah, I'm going to really be a poor performer and fuck these guys up. No, they don't. People are like trying, right? So the question is, why aren't they? Maybe they don't have the support. Maybe there's some part of the organization, product or marketing isn't there. And maybe they don't have the skills, right? So why don't you sit with them, figure that out, and we're going to work on a plan and help you develop that, right? And it's okay that you're not competent now, right? That would be a game changer, right? So I saw there's a whole bunch of things from sport that apply to business, and so we started doing that, and the market has really embraced it. So that's kind of what I do. So that's the intro. And let me just go back, take that, and then segue into what you were saying. So a lot of times I'll hear that question about how do we decide what to focus on. And it's not just individuals like yourself who are ambitious and dynamic. It's also corporations, right? A lot of corporations I go into are suffering from what they call change fatigue, right? They just launch a plethora of initiatives and people don't even understand and then people are just tired, right? So for me, the answer to the question is, how do you prioritize? I always use the metaphor of energy, right? So if you look at the more focused the energy is, the more power you have. And the more dispersed it is, the more you lose power. So look at a woman's high heel shoe, right? She steps with you with the heel, it really hurts. Why? Because all that weight is focused on a little point. If she takes off the shoe, it hurts a lot less, right? How do martial art masters break bricks, right? They put all their focus on a little point. If you take that energy and push a wall, you don't move it, right? So as your energy disperses, you lose power. So that's the challenge when you have a lot of priorities. It's great to have that ambition, but if you don't know how to prioritize, you will never get anything done because you've only got a certain amount. And even mental energy. Here's another example, because again, I know you like stories. So when I worked with tennis players, this concept was really key. There was one guy especially, and he'd go in, and when he made a mistake, he would just go off, right? So example, he's playing, that guy scores a point on him, and so he's thinking about that point. He gets over to the other side, he's going to receive serve, and he's still thinking about that point. Boom, ball goes right past him. Now he's got 2 points to be upset about, right? And he just starts to bleed out. And the problem is, like I said to him, when you are thinking about that other point, you're dispersing energy. You don't have all your mental focus on what's coming at you. Part of you is thinking about this, right? And when you start to do that, have you ever driven and you don't remember how you got there, right? Because your mind is somewhere else, right? You are never as sharp and never react. So when you're doing something so difficult like professional tennis and the guy you got it on the other side of the net is really good, you need 100%, right? And so the same thing goes for your priorities. If you want to do something ambitious, you can't candy ass it. You can't do it. I'd say that to kids. Oh, I want to be a football player. So how much you going to train? Oh, on weekends. And then I'm going to play rugby and I'm going to do it. And that's all great. But, it's not going to make it because the volume you're putting in isn't going to meet the commitment of other people. Right. So that's what you got to do. You say, I need to put 100% of my energy on this. And then you can have 2 or 3 things in parallel, right? You can take out energy. So now, okay, I stop working. And then this hour, I'm with my daughter. Right. And then tomorrow I go back to work. But it's a limited number of things. You can't then be, 17 things because then you just don't have the energy. You're exhausted, right? So that's how I prioritize it. I say to me and myself, is this important? And what's the most important thing right now? And then from there, I start adding stuff. And then I cut off. So a lot of times I will say to clients or, I will turn away stuff if I can't deliver it properly. Say, look, we're booked. We have like 25 people now, and sometimes we're just booked. And I say, I can do it in 6 months. I just can't do it now. I'd rather do that than do it poorly because that's my reputation and that's our goal, right? I mean, and so sometimes I just say, can't do it. Or, look, I promised I was going to take my son here. I'd be running too tight. Can't do it, right? And I understand the consequences. I may be giving up stuff, but that's why it's so important to get your priorities clear in life. Right? I did this exercise about maybe 25 years ago, 30 years. Yeah, 25 years ago. So I had a company. I sold it, made good money off it. And then I kind of sat under a tree and I said, okay, so what do I want to do now? Right. And that's where I went to, I got in this cycle, and this, maybe some of your listeners have this, where everything that came to my mind was something I had done before or was qualified to do. Right. But then I'd never innovate. So I thought, okay, forget about that. No limits, right? If I could do whatever I wanted, what would I do? And I just started brainstorming. And then I got, oh man, it was all over the place, right? Movie star, athlete, blah, blah. So I was thinking about everything. And then I said, okay, so how much of these things, which ones would I really be willing to sacrifice a lot for? And then I said, well, movie star sounds cool, but I really don't care, right? I don't have a passion for acting out, right? And you go through the whole thing. And then I came on down to 2 or 3 things that really, so sport was really important for me. Performance was really important for me. And that's how this business was grown. It was, this is what I can get up and feel like I'm not working, even though I'm working, 80 hours a day. And it drives me. It's great because it drives me personally to keep training, right? I mean, I'm not going to be a competitive athlete now anymore. But I consider myself my own lab, right? So if people see me and I'm in shape and I'm doing stuff and, I'm still working on myself, then I can say with a lot of credibility to my clients, I tried this on me. This technique I'm showing you, I tried this on me, right? Mental technique, physical technique. So for me, the question of how do I focus my energy, it's what are the priorities? And that goes to the second thing, which is about success, right? So what is success? And we talk about success like it's one thing, right? Like intelligence. We talk about intelligence like it's one, and it's not, right? There's actually studies. There's emotional intelligence. There's there's mathematical intelligence. There's spatial intelligence. There's musical intelligence, right? And that's one of the problems with our school system, which if we go down that rabbit hole, we'll spend 6 hours on this. But but we talk about it, and success. We do the same thing. Right. I remember I have a really good friend who studied Yale with me, and he's a Norwegian guy, and he did investment banking. And he said to me one day, I'll never forget this conversation. And he said, well, I've realized that a lot of really successful people aren't happy. And I said to him, how can you be successful if you're not happy? Right. And he said, oh, well, I mean, people with a lot of money. And then I said, well, maybe you need to redefine what success means. And, I went through that personally. This is where those, I built this company. I stayed on as CEO. It was a 300-person company. And I remember the day I decided I had to leave there because I was driving to work. It was like 6 a.m. My stomach was all upset because I was always under tension. I was working 100 hours a week. And I got into my office and, I had, CEO, great title, great business card. I had this secretary who was wonderful. And I thought, yep, this is a dream. And then I said, shit, but it's not my dream. It's my mother's dream, right? Which was wonderful. But she was an immigrant, and that for her was like the biggest, thing. But it wasn't my dream. And that was the moment where I said, well, I have to start saying, screw you, to people and whatever because the one who lives with me every night when I get home is me, right? So whether you think that what I do is cool or not really doesn't matter, right? What matters is if I get home and I'm happy and then I can be the best version of me for my kid, my kids and my wife, or my son, my wife, etc. And so that's how I prioritize. It's So what is the definition of success? And I think too many people, don't even think about that. What is success? I mean, it could be living in a log cabin, right? It's getting up and not feeling
Yeah.
stressed. A lot of
Yeah.
people live with a lot of anxiety now, right? And I think
Yeah.
the younger generations are starting to question that, right? For me, success is not 50 years in the same job so that I can have 10 years of retirement, right? And that's neither good nor bad. It's just okay. And what we're saying about relationships, a monogamous marriage or an open relationship are not good or bad, right? I don't care. I have my criteria, right? I know what I
Yeah.
want. That's my success. But the other one is not necessarily bad, right? It just has to work for you. And that's
Yeah.
where as as a world, as a culture, we have a problem because we need everybody else to be in agreement with what we think is good, right? Which is why there's so many fights over religion, which are all
Yeah.
fundamentally, be good, be nice, and love people, right? I mean, that's it, right? But no, the
Yeah.
way I say it is the way that you say it, and no, right? I mean, right? Just, is it good? Does it work for you? That's great. I'm so happy for you, right?
Yeah.
I don't want that. I want this, right? That's all perfectly good. So I think
Yeah.
the focus and the choosing is all around what, remember, you have finite energy. Even a guy like you with a lot of energy, really bright guy, you can only do so many things, right? So what are
Yeah.
those important things, and bet there, because if you're trying to do something spectacular, probably your competition is spectacular too. So 30% of you is never going to be them, right? So me training
Yeah.
30% will never beat a Michael Jordan. Probably 100% would
Yeah.
never beat him. But I get closer. I get a hell of a lot closer.
Yep.
But with 30%, I get blown
Yep.
out of the water, right?
Yeah.
So that's my
Indeed.
thoughts.
No, that no, I understand, and we are closing in, so I actually have a lot of follow-up questions, but I'm like, we have to park this for some other time because we are hitting the time, and I want to still talk about a lot of things, and I'm sad that I have to let you go. But I think what you said had so much stuff that I could really talk about. As you said, you can have monumental ideas, you can have hundreds of things that you're working on, but you are spreading yourself thin. And if you're spreading yourself thin, it's not quality work. And you will always be blown out of the water by someone who's actually just working on that one thing. So it is about balance. It is about focused attention. And I personally am struggling with that because, again, another thing that it's very interesting to see in that way we're different. So you said your wife makes a joke that you have a certain kind of
Mm-hmm.
a focus of a way that you're really obsessed with things, but I'm the other way around. I have focus, but my focus dissipates like this. My wife tells me that I have ADHD because I'm like, one day I look at this, I'm like, I want this, I want to work on this startup, and the next day I look at that, I'm like, I want that, and the next day I look at that and I go like, I want that, and then my backlog is filled of like 50 things I want to do in this year alone, and that's not possible. So it's very difficult. But one thing I want to leave with, and this is more of a funny story rather than something serious, but when I look at you, I see an embodiment of patience. You've been training for 30 plus years. You've been working out for 30 plus years. You build your businesses from scratch. And as a young guy, I'm genuinely scared of that because I always call up my mom and I tell them, Mom, I've been doing this, my job for almost 7 years now. When does it stop? I'm tired. And she's like, you just started. It's just been 7 years. You need to do this for like 20, 30 years. And my mind is not resonating. My mind is not accepting that feeling that, my God, Adolfo, you've worked for 35 years. You've actually worked out. So not just worked in a job, but you actually have been physically working out for 30 plus years. How do you wake up in the morning and see, okay, I'm gonna be doing this is a part of me. This is just a part of me. I cannot take it away. And that just beyond me. So last remarks on that, and then we end the conversation.
Sure. And just to say, glad to come back and have another conversation whenever you want, because I think we could do this for 7 hours. Yeah, okay. So for me, that the essence of that is finding what sparks the fire in your soul, right? So I'm working on, I said when I went into a dojo for the first time, there was something in me. I swear, I thought, and I was young. I was like maybe 12, 14. I thought, it's like I'd done this in another life. There was something special about that, and I've never lost that. And the thing I most liked about martial arts was I knew it would never end, right? I knew it was, and you looked at the masters and the great masters, and they all would say, once you get to a black belt, it's just the beginning, right? And they would say, you get what your black belt wears out, right? And I've been wearing my black belt for so long, it wears out, and then it becomes white, and so you become a beginner again, and you realize you don't know anything.
Ah,
And that's kind of, for me, the fun part of it. And I've learned to challenge my paradigm. So it's about getting over your ego, right? So finding what you really want, and then I'll say, okay,
yeah,
so I was pretty good. I've been doing this for a long time. I'd won a lot of tournaments. And then I said, okay, so what don't I know? So I work with this ballet teacher, right? and she
Yeah.
kicks my ass, man. I mean, she really kicks my ass because she just has, this deep muscle and this deep muscle. Because when you're really ambitious, here's a hack that people need to be careful with. When you're ambitious, you focus on result, right? So I was focusing
Yeah.
on getting my kick there, right? Now,
Yeah.
I wasn't doing the fundamental work to make sure that I was doing that right, right? And the way
Yeah.
the body works is, and it's the way organizations work, is you leverage your strength and you overload your strength, and then you compensate for your weaknesses, right? So if your hip
Yeah.
doesn't move right, you overload your hamstrings, right? And in your organization, if customer service doesn't work right, you overload operations, and you're right. And so because you just want the final result, right? Now, what
Yeah.
happened? What's the problem? That's not a road to mastery. And if
Mm.
you do that, then eventually you're overloading so much that something breaks, which has happened to me, and it's
Yeah.
happened to a lot of people, and it happens to a lot of athletes, right?
Yeah.
So that's when you need to mature. And that's the moment that you get consistency and patience, is where you need to go back and go, okay, so what are the fundamentals, and look around. So what do people who are
Yeah.
really exceptional at this do? And, I always say, choose your references carefully, because that defines how you feel about yourself, right? So if I want to
Yeah.
feel great, I have 5 little fat friends, and I go, I'm in great shape, right? But if I want to push myself, I have 5 friends who are really cutting in shape, and I go, shit, I could be better, right?
Yeah.
And so I find people, and I'm a big fan of super specializations. I find people who are really specialized in one thing. So my
Yeah.
dance teacher, Donna, and she is just really good. And then she can do things that I'm like, wow, I didn't even know a human could do that, right? And then she
Yeah.
says, so now you need to challenge yourself. What do you need to do to get there? And that's where, for me,
Yeah.
it's fun. And I have no idea. And then you embrace the suck, right? You start going through and go,
Yeah.
boy, this is shit. And I feel like a beginner again, and you feel stupid. And but I've learned to love that, because that means I know that's going to take me somewhere much better, right? And it's just
Yeah.
like, it's like a marriage. Marriages goes in cycles, right? And so at the
Yeah.
beginning, and then you get to like whatever, the 7-year itch or whatever. If you
Yeah.
can then say, okay, so what do I now have to do? Because up until now, maybe everything was common. We had this. Now we've got challenges. Your life is changing. My life is changing. We have a child. Okay, so how can I really be? What do I need to do so that this relationship fundamentally is stronger? And you need to learn to communicate better, which people we
Yeah.
suck at.
Yeah.
And you need to really care, and then you need to start thinking, proactively, what else can I do? And you be more mindful of what your partner's feeling. And then you
Yeah.
say, you look back and you go, wow, I am so much better than I was, 5 years ago. And now you say, okay, so what can I do to be who I want to be in the future, right? It's about
Yeah.
deciding where you want to be. And it doesn't have to be 30 years. That's, 3, 5 years, 1 year. And then
Yeah.
acting like that person. And then you realize, and it's where measurement comes in, right? You're not being that person, right? What would the best in the world at this do? So if after 7 years it seems like a long road, it's because you're not seeing how much better you can get, right? And so I can't
Yeah.
give up on something if I can get better. And
Yeah.
I haven't done everything I could. And then once I, get there, fine. But since I never get there, that's fine. So that's why I just keep doing it, because I know I'll never get there. And the moment you enjoy that, that's the fun part. So then it doesn't matter the result of one day, or if you can do some milestone. You were saying people get happy when they have the when syndrome, right? I'll be happy when I get the raise, when I
Yeah.
have the house paid off, right? Then you're always struggling and you're never happy. So the happiness is great. I discovered something I suck at, I can get better at, and this will drive my performance. Boom, and then I'm in, and I'm assessed on that, and I'm just proud because I'm doing it. And then I can look back and say, maybe I did it better or worse, but I'm working on making myself better. And I think that's all any of us can ask, right? It's just to
Yeah.
try and be better.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you so much, Adolfo. Love this. Love the conversation. I know you have a hard stop, so I want to stop this conversation here so that you have some rest
Mm.
and before you move on, and I also have some rest before I break for lunch. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. I hope you learned something today that you didn't know before, and I will talk to you next time.
That's
Bye
a
bye.
pleasure. Thanks for having me on.